Chapter 1. The Detective and the Mysterious Lady. The rain beat against the windows as if it wanted to enter and unveil the secrets hidden in Jack Malone's office. He was seated behind his mahogany desk, a half-empty bottle of bourbon by his side, and a cigarette slowly burning in the ashtray. The office had a heavy atmosphere, imbued with the smell of tobacco and untold stories. The shadows of the blinds danced on the walls, creating a somber ballet in the dim light of the lamp. Jack Malone, a middle-aged private detective, wore a worn but still elegant suit, with a fedora hat that hid his tired and cynical eyes. He had seen it all in this city: corruption, betrayal, unexplained deaths. His life was a compendium of unsolved cases and poorly told mysteries, and that night seemed just another one on his list, until the office door opened. She entered like a ghost, shrouded in mystery. Veronica, a woman with ethereal beauty and eyes that hid deep secrets. Her red dress contrasted with the monotonous gray of the office, bringing a splash of color to Jack's faded life. "Good evening, Mr. Malone," she said, her voice smooth as silk, but with an undertone of hidden desperation. "I need your help. My brother has disappeared." Jack raised his eyes, studying her carefully. "Have a seat, miss." "Veronica," she replied, settling into the chair in front of him. "Veronica Delacroix." He lit another cigarette, offering it to her, which she declined with a slight shake of her head. "Tell me more about this disappearance." "My brother, Charles, is an investigative journalist. He was working on a big story, something related to the local mafia. He said he was close to a major breakthrough, but a week ago he disappeared without a trace." Jack exhaled the smoke, forming a mist between them. "Have you contacted the police?" Veronica shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't trust them. The mafia has too many tentacles in this city. We need someone from outside, someone who isn't involved." Jack nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "And what makes you think the mafia is involved?" She took a small photo from her pocket, placing it on the desk. It was of Charles, smiling next to a man Jack immediately recognized: Don Vito Morelli, the head of the most powerful criminal organization in the city. "He told me he was infiltrating, trying to get evidence." "I fear what they might have done to him," Veronica said, her voice trembling. Jack picked up the photo, his eyes narrowing. "It seems your brother was playing with fire, and now it's up to me to find out if he got burned." Veronica grasped Jack's hand, her eyes pleading for help. "Please, Mr. Malone, save my brother. He's all I have left." Jack looked into those pleading eyes and felt a tightening in his chest. He knew he was getting into something big, something dangerous, but his moral compass, though worn, still pointed north. "I'll take the case," he said, holding her hand back, "but I need all the information you have. Every detail can make a difference." Veronica nodded, relieved. "Anything you need, Mr. Malone. I'm at your disposal." Jack watched as she left the office, the sound of her steps echoing down the corridor. When the door closed, he sighed, grabbed the bottle of bourbon, and poured himself another drink. "Welcome to the game, Malone," he murmured to himself, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes." He extinguished the cigarette, threw the butt in the ashtray, and stood up, ready to face whatever came next. The city was full of secrets, and Jack was about to unearth them one by one. Chapter 2. Shadowy Clues. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, turning the streets into rivers of filth and despair. Jack Malone left his office, his fedora pulled down, and his coat collar turned up to shield himself from the storm. The city at night had an air of mystery and danger. Street lights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the brick walls, while the alleys whispered dark secrets. His first destination was Charles Delacroix's apartment. He needed to start somewhere, and there was no better place than the victim's home. He climbed the creaking stairs to the third floor and found the door ajar. Jack drew his revolver and cautiously pushed the door open. The apartment was a mess. Books and papers were scattered on the floor, drawers overturned. It looked like someone had been searching for something important. Jack began to sift through Charles's belongings, looking for clues. On a table in the corner, he found a notebook. It was an investigation journal. He sat in a chair, flipping through the pages filled with detailed notes. Names, dates, locations. Charles had infiltrated deep into Don Vito Morelli's organization. Jack noted some names that appeared repeatedly. Tony, the Fat Ricci, Salvatore, the Snake, Esposito, and Benny the Rat. He knew these names were key pieces to unraveling the mystery. As he studied the journal, a sound made him freeze. Someone was in the hallway. Jack stood quickly, his revolver in hand. The door creaked again, and a figure entered. It was a thin man in a worn suit, with shrewd eyes and a cynical smile. "Benny the Rat, I presume," said Jack, not lowering his weapon. "You must be Malone," replied Benny, raising his hands. "Calm down. I'm here to help. Veronica sent me. We need to talk." Jack lowered the gun but remained suspicious. "And why should I trust you?" Benny shrugged. "I'm not saying you should, but I know things that can help find Charles, and I'm in as much trouble as he is. If Morelli finds out I'm talking, I'm dead." Jack watched Benny for a moment, then nodded. "All right, sit down. Let's talk." The two sat at the table, Charles's journal between them. "What do you know about Charles's disappearance?" Jack asked. Charles was close to discovering something big, a connection between Morelli and a local politician, dirty money, influence trafficking. He had evidence and Morelli found out. "I think they got to him before he could turn over the material." Jack frowned. "And do you have any idea where he might be?" Benny shook his head. "Not exactly, but I know of a warehouse at the port, one of Morelli's hideouts. If he's still alive, he could be there." Jack stood up, determined. "Let's head there. We don't have time to waste." Benny followed, nervous. "Are you sure? Morelli is dangerous. If he catches us—" "We'll take the risk," said Jack, placing a hand on Benny's shoulder. "Be brave, Rat. We're getting Charles out of there." They left the apartment, the rain still pouring heavily. The deserted streets seemed to watch their every move, silent accomplices in the mission they were about to undertake. Jack knew time was against them, but the determination in his heart was stronger than ever. On the way to the port, the shadows of the old and rusted buildings enveloped them. The city, with all its secrets, seemed to whisper to the detective and the informant. Jack quickened his pace, his weapon firm in his hand, while Benny followed closely, eyes alert. They rode a narrow chateau d'eau at the warehouse, an old decrepit structure with broken windows and rusted doors. Jack signaled for Benny to be quiet as they approached. He peeked through a broken window and saw two of Morelli's henchmen, armed, guarding the place. "We need to be quick and silent," Jack murmured. Benny nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm with you, Malone." Jack took a deep breath, preparing for what was to come. He knew every second counted, and that the shadows of the warehouse could hide both answers and more questions. The mission was just beginning, and he was ready to face anything. Chapter 3. The Port Labyrinth. The darkness at the port was nearly total, except for the occasional flashes from the headlights of a distant ship. Jack and Benny slinked through the shadows, approaching the warehouse where Morelli's henchmen stood guard. The sound of waves crashing against the wooden pilings was muffled by the mechanical noises of the dock, creating an atmosphere of almost palpable tension. "Let's go around the side," Jack whispered, pointing to a broken window further back on the building. "Less chance of being seen." Benny nodded, visibly nervous, but following Jack without hesitation. The two moved with the stealth of nocturnal predators, their steps barely audible on the wet concrete. When they reached the window, Jack peered inside. The warehouse interior was a maze of crates and old machinery, with dim yellow lights hanging from the high ceiling, casting threatening shadows. "You go first," said Jack, helping Benny climb through the window. "I'll cover you." Benny went in first, falling silently between two large crates. Jack followed quickly, landing with the same agility. They stayed crouched, moving carefully through the labyrinth. The tension in the air was almost tangible, like a rope about to snap. "There," Benny murmured, pointing to a door at the back of the warehouse. "That's where they keep the prisoners." Jack nodded, his hand firm on his revolver. They advanced, peeking around each corner, every shadow, alert for any movement. When they reached the door, Jack signaled for Benny to stop and listened. From the other side, he heard muffled voices and the sound of someone groaning. Jack slowly opened the door, revealing a small, dimly lit room. In the center, tied to a chair, was Charles Delacroix. He was bruised, but alive. Charles's eyes widened when he saw Jack and Benny. "Jack, Benny, thank God," he whispered, his voice weak. "Shh," Jack calmed him, quickly untying him. "We need to get out of here now." But before they could leave, they heard heavy footsteps approaching. Jack looked at Benny and murmured, "Get ready. This is going to be a rough exit." The two henchmen guarding the warehouse entrance were now on alert, roused by the sounds. The door was flung open, and the men entered with guns drawn. Jack didn't hesitate. He shot first, hitting one of the henchmen in the shoulder. The other ran behind a stack of crates, returning fire. "Benny, get Charles out of here!" shouted Jack, taking cover behind a crate and exchanging shots with the remaining henchmen. Benny grabbed Charles, helping him up and guiding him to the exit. The gunfire echoed through the warehouse, tension rising with each passing second. Jack finally got a clear shot, taking down the last henchman. He rushed to the exit, finding Benny and Charles already outside, trying to hide in the shadows. "Quick! To the car!" Jack ordered, guiding them to his vehicle parked nearby. They piled into the car, and Jack floored the accelerator, tires screeching as they sped away from the port. On the way, Charles revealed more about his findings. "Morelli is involved in a political conspiracy bigger than we imagined. He has judges, cops, even politicians in his pocket. I was close to exposing everything, but someone betrayed me." Jack frowned, his instincts already pointing to Veronica. "We need to find a safe place for you, Charles. Then we'll have a serious talk with your sister." The car sped away from the port, carrying more questions than answers. Jack knew the worst was yet to come, but he was determined to see it through to the end. The shadows of the city were starting to reveal their secrets, and Jack Malone was ready to face each one. Chapter 4. The First Threat. Jack drove through the dark streets of the city, the headlights cutting through the heavy fog of the early morning. Charles lay in the back seat, groaning softly from his injuries. Benny kept a vigilant eye on the rearview mirror, expecting, at any moment, to see Morelli's henchmen on their tail. They needed a safe place, and fast. "There's an old abandoned warehouse on the west side of the city," Benny suggested. "We used it as a hideout in the past. It should be empty." Jack nodded, turning the car at a corner and speeding toward the suggested destination. The silence in the car was heavy, each person immersed in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the warehouse, Jack helped Charles out of the car and supported him while Benny opened the rusty door. The interior of the warehouse was cold and dark, with only a few old pieces of furniture scattered on the dusty floor. Jack helped Charles lie down on an old sofa, then turned his attention to Benny. "We need supplies, food, medicine, and we need to keep an eye on Morelli's movements. Can you handle that?" asked Jack. Benny nodded. "I know some people who can help. I'll be back as soon as I can." With that, he slipped out the door, disappearing into the darkness. Jack sat in a chair next to Charles, watching him. "You're safe now. We'll find out who betrayed you and put an end to this." Charles sighed, His eyes closed. "Thank you, Jack. I knew I could trust you." As Jack kept watch over the warehouse, his thoughts began to whirl. Veronica. He couldn't ignore the possibility that she was involved. He needed to confront her, but he knew it would require caution. He picked up the phone and dialed the number Veronica had left. "Veronica, we need to talk." "In person," he said when she answered. "Jack, what happened? Did you find Charles?" The concern in her voice sounded genuine, but Jack couldn't let himself be fooled so easily. "Yes, but he's hurt. I'll send someone to pick you up. We need to talk about a few things," Jack replied. Veronica agreed, and after hanging up, Jack sat there, staring at the phone, trying to decipher the truth behind her words. An hour later, Benny returned with supplies and troubling news. "Morelli's furious," he said, placing a bag of provisions on the floor. "He knows we're after him and he's sending more men. We need to act fast." Jack looked at Charles, who was a bit more alert after receiving some care. "Stay here and rest. Benny and I will go get Veronica. I need answers." As Jack and Benny set out again, the city seemed even darker, as if it sensed the impending confrontation. They arrived at the agreed location and found Veronica waiting, wrapped in a coat, her eyes reflecting concern. "Jack, what's going on?" she asked, getting into the car. "We need to talk, Veronica. There are many things that don't add up," said Jack, driving back to the warehouse. On the way, the silence was almost unbearable. Jack knew that every word spoken that night could change the course of everything. When they arrived at the warehouse, Jack led Veronica inside, where Charles lay on the sofa. "Charles!" exclaimed Veronica, running to him. "Thank God you're alive." Charles opened his eyes, looking at his sister. "Veronica, we need to talk." Jack watched the two, the tension in the air growing. Charles discovered something big, and someone betrayed him. "We need to know the truth, Veronica. What do you really know about all this?" Veronica remained silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I knew Charles was in danger, but I never imagined things would get to this point. Don Vito, he's our father." The revelation fell like a bomb in the warehouse. Jack and Benny exchanged surprised looks. "And you wanted to take him down?" asked Jack. "Yes," admitted Veronica, tears in her eyes. "He destroyed our lives, manipulated everything. I wanted justice. That's why I sought you out, Jack. You're the only person who could help us expose the truth." Jack rubbed his chin, processing the information. "This changes everything, but we still need to be careful. Don Vito won't stop until he destroys us." Charles tried to get up, but Jack stopped him. "Rest, Charles. We'll take care of this." Veronica looked at Jack, determination in her eyes. "I'm with you, Jack. We'll end this together." The storm outside seemed to presage the battle that was approaching. Jack knew the final confrontation with Don Vito was getting closer, and they would need all the strength and allies possible to survive. Chapter 5. Uncovering Secrets. As the early morning hours crept by, the tension in the abandoned warehouse was palpable. Jack, Veronica, Charles, and Benny gathered around an old table, discussing their plan. The revelation that Don Vito was Veronica and Charles's father had changed everything. They knew they were dealing with a relentless enemy, and every move had to be calculated with precision. "Benny," said Jack, looking at the informant, "we need more information about Don Vito's operations, something we can use against him." Benny nodded, nervous. "I'll talk to my contacts. I know some places where we can find important documents, but it's going to be risky." "We have to take that risk," Jack replied firmly. "Veronica, you stay here with Charles. He still needs to recover. Benny and I will go after the evidence." Veronica held Charles's hand, nodding silently. Jack and Benny left the warehouse, the darkness of the night enveloping their figures as they headed toward the city center. The air was cold, and the dense fog made everything more mysterious. "I know a place where Morelli keeps important documents," Benny said, breaking the silence. "A discreet office in an old office building downtown. If we can get in, We can find what we need. Jack looked at Benny, assessing the determination on the informant's face. Let's do this, but we need to be quick and quiet. They arrived at the office building, an old structure with dirty windows and a sleepy doorman. Benny used his skills to bribe the doorman, ensuring there would be no problems with their entry. They silently took the elevator to the floor, where Morelli's office was located. The door was locked, but Benny was adept with locks. In a few minutes, they managed to enter. The office was luxurious, decorated with expensive furniture and artworks on the walls. Jack began to rummage through drawers and cabinets, while Benny searched the files. "We found something," Benny murmured, holding a bundle of documents. "Evidence of bribery. Illegal transactions. Everything we need to bring Morelli down." Jack took the documents, examining them quickly. "This is pure gold. We need to get this to a safe place." As they prepared to leave, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Jack signaled for Benny to hide, while he positioned himself behind the door, revolver in hand. The door opened slowly, revealing two of Morelli's henchmen. "What are you doing here?" one of them asked, his voice laden with suspicion. Before they could react, Jack struck, knocking one of the henchmen down with a quick blow. Benny, taking advantage of the distraction, lunged at the other, immobilizing him with a chokehold. Within minutes, both were unconscious on the floor. "Let's get out of here," said Jack, helping Benny up, "quickly before anyone else shows up." They left the building as discreetly as they had entered, adrenaline pumping through their veins. Back in the car, Jack drove at high speed to the warehouse, the precious documents securely stored in the back seat. When they arrived, Veronica and Charles were waiting, tension evident on their faces. Jack laid the documents on the table, spreading them out for all to see. "This is everything we need to bring down Morelli," he said, looking at each of them. "But we need a plan to make this public." Charles, still weak, struggled to sit up. "I have a contact at the newspaper, someone trustworthy who can help us expose this." Jack nodded. "Perfect. We'll do this in the morning. But for now, we need to rest and prepare. Morelli won't take this lying down." As the night drew to a close, the group knew that the next day would be crucial. The battle against Morelli was about to heat up, and they would need all the courage and cunning they could muster to win. Chapter 6. Internal Conflicts. The first light of morning filtered through the dirty windows of the warehouse, casting long shadows on the dusty floor. Jack, Veronica, Charles, and Benny were gathered around an old table, the documents spread out between them. The plan was ready: expose Don Vito Morelli and his web of corruption to the world. "Charles, you said you know someone at the newspaper, someone trustworthy," Jack began, looking at the injured journalist. "Who is this person?" "Martin O'Leary," replied Charles, still with a pained expression. "He's the editor of the local newspaper, one of the few who hasn't been bought by Morelli. If we give him this evidence, he'll publish it." Jack nodded, absorbing the information. "Then that's it. We'll go there and hand everything over to O'Leary. He'll know what to do." Veronica, who had been quiet until then, stepped closer to Jack, her eyes revealing a mixture of fear and determination. "Jack, I want to go with you. I need to see this happen. I need to make sure my father pays for his crimes." Jack hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. "All right, Veronica, but we have to be careful. Morelli will be watching us." They prepared quickly, gathering the documents and ensuring they had everything they needed. Charles, still weak, was helped by Benny to the car. Jack took the wheel, Veronica by his side in the front seat. The drive to the newspaper was tense, each corner turned cautiously, every suspicious car closely watched. Finally, they arrived at the newspaper building, an old and imposing structure that seemed to resist both time and the corruption infesting the city. Inside the newspaper, they were greeted by Martin O'Leary, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a severe expression. "Charles, "Thank God you're all right," he exclaimed, hugging his friend. "We don't have much time, Martin," said Charles, handing over the documents. "This is everything we've got on Morelli. We need you to publish it as soon as possible." O'Leary flipped through the documents, his eyes widening with each page. "This is explosive, but also extremely dangerous." "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jack intervened. "We have no choice. If we don't do this, Morelli will continue destroying lives. We need to expose the truth." O'Leary nodded, resolute. "I'll get everything ready. By tomorrow morning, the whole city will know the truth about Don Vito Morelli." With the plan in motion, the group left the newspaper, relieved but still tense. As they drove back to the warehouse, Jack felt a growing unease. Something was wrong. Veronica was too quiet, her eyes avoiding his. "Veronica, is there something you're not telling me?" Jack asked, his voice firm. She hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Jack, I wasn't completely honest. I knew Charles was in danger, and I knew my father might try to kill him, but I didn't know how to stop him." Jack frowned. "You knew more than you told us, didn't you? And that's why you came to me. It wasn't just about Charles. It was about taking down your father." Veronica nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I needed someone like you, Jack. Someone who could stand up to Morelli. But I didn't want to put everyone in danger." Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "Veronica, this is more than a matter of trust. We're all at risk now. We need to be completely honest with each other." Before they could continue the conversation, a car appeared out of nowhere, ramming into their rear. Jack struggled to maintain control as Benny shouted, "Morelli! It's Morelli's men!" The car was forced to stop, and armed henchmen surrounded the vehicle. Jack quickly exited, drawing his weapon and exchanging fire with the attackers. Veronica and Charles ducked in the car, while Benny tried to fight back with a hidden gun. The shootout was quick and intense, but Jack managed to take down the henchmen one by one. Silence returned, the distant sound of sirens announcing the arrival of the police. "Let's go, we need to get out of here before more of them show up," said Jack, helping Veronica and Charles to their feet. Benny was unharmed, but visibly shaken. They managed to escape the scene, returning to the warehouse with heavy hearts and minds full of uncertainty. Jack knew the battle was far from over, and increasingly, everyone's secrets were becoming dangerously intertwined. Back at the warehouse, they regrouped, the adrenaline of the fight still coursing through their veins. Jack looked around at his companions, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. "We need to be smarter, more careful. Morelli won't stop until he's destroyed us." Veronica, still shaken, looked at Jack with a mix of guilt and resolve. "I'm sorry, Jack. I'll be honest from now on. We have to work together if we're going to bring him down." Charles, resting on the old sofa, nodded. "We can do this. We have the evidence and we have each other. We just need to stay focused." Benny, usually full of nervous energy, seemed calm for once. "Let's end this, Jack, once and for all." As the dawn lightened the sky outside, Jack knew they were in for the fight of their lives. Morelli was powerful and ruthless, but they had truth and determination on their side. It would take all their courage and cunning to see this through to the end. Chapter 7. The Revelation. Back at the warehouse, the tension was palpable. The concrete walls seemed to close in around them, creating a prison of fear and uncertainty. Charles lay on an old mattress in the corner, trying to rest, while Benny kept a nervous watch near the entrance. Jack and Veronica were seated at the table, Morelli's documents spread out before them. "Jack," began Veronica, breaking the silence that hung like a heavy cloud, "I know you're furious with me, and you have every right to be. But I had no other choice." Jack looked at her, his eyes hardened by distrust. "Veronica, I understand you were trying to protect your brother, but using me without being completely honest put all of us at risk." She nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. "I know, and I'm sorry, but now we need to work together. We need to end this." Before Jack could respond, Charles stirred on the mattress, catching their attention. "Jack, Veronica, I need to tell you something." They approached, listening attentively as Charles spoke. "I discovered something before I was captured, something big. Morelli isn't just buying politicians. He's involved in human trafficking. Women and children being sold like commodities. I was trying to gather evidence when they got me." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "That's monstrous. That's why he wanted me dead," continued Charles. "And that's why we need to expose everything. Not just the bribes, but this horrific scheme. We need to make sure he never hurts anyone again." Veronica held Charles's hand, her eyes filled with determination. "We will, Charles. We'll bring him down." At that moment, Benny, who was near the entrance, signaled for everyone to be quiet. "Someone's coming," he murmured, drawing his gun. Jack positioned himself by the door, revolver in hand. The tension was almost unbearable as the footsteps approached. The door opened slowly, and a tall, imposing figure entered. It was Don Vito Morelli, flanked by 2 henchmen. "Malone," said Morelli, his voice deep and full of disdain. "I knew you were involved, always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Jack aimed his gun at Morelli, his eyes filled with hate. "You've committed many crimes, Morelli, but this is unforgivable." Morelli laughed, a cold and soulless sound. "You really think you can take me down with a few papers and words? I control this city. Nothing happens without my permission." Jack didn't back down. "These documents will destroy you, and will make sure everyone knows the truth about the monster you are." Morelli stepped forward, his henchmen moving with him. "You really think you're going to get out of here alive? That anyone will listen to you?" At that moment, Veronica stepped beside Jack, holding a gun. "Yes, Father. We'll make sure of it." The surprise in Morelli's eyes was evident, but quickly replaced by anger. "Veronica, you've always been a sentimental fool, never had the guts to do what's necessary. This ends now," she said firmly. "We're going to bring you down." A tense standoff unfolded, Morelli's henchmen moving to attack. Jack and Benny reacted quickly, exchanging gunfire amid the chaos. Veronica, with a steady hand, kept her gun pointed at her father. "Veronica, don't do this," Morelli said, trying to maintain control. "You don't have what it takes." "I'm your daughter," she replied, her eyes shining with determination. "And I'll make sure you pay for everything." With a swift move, Jack took down one of the henchmen while Benny handled the other. Morelli, realizing he was at a disadvantage, tried to retreat. But Veronica was ready. "It's over, Father," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "This is the end." Morelli looked at her, a mix of disdain and acceptance on his face. "You'll pay for this, Veronica. You and all of them." Before he could make any move, Jack advanced, disarming him and bringing him to the ground. "Not this time, Morelli." With Morelli immobilized, Jack looked at Veronica. "We'll turn him and these documents over to the police. It's over." The city, with all its dark secrets, was about to see the light of truth, and Jack knew that finally justice was within reach. As they prepared to leave, the weight of the moment sank in. They had succeeded in bringing down one of the most powerful and corrupt figures in the city. But they also knew that their fight wasn't completely over. They still had to navigate the fallout, ensure the evidence was securely handed over, and deal with any remaining threats from Morelli's organization. As they stepped out into the morning light, Jack felt a sense of resolve and unity among the group. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger. Now they would continue to fight for justice and make sure the city could no longer be held hostage by fear and corruption. Together, They would rebuild and protect the city, ensuring that the sacrifices they made were not in vain. And in that moment, Jack realized that sometimes the battle for justice required more than courage. It required trust, determination, and a willingness to face the deepest shadows head-on. Chapter 8. The Grand Showdown. The first light of dawn began to filter through the windows of the warehouse, revealing a scene of chaos and tension. Don Vito Morelli, handcuffed and defeated, sat against the wall, his hateful gaze fixed on Jack, Veronica, and the others. Jack knew time was running out. They needed to get Morelli and the evidence to the police before his henchmen reacted. "We have to move quickly," Jack said, his tone urgent. "Veronica, you stay here with Charles and Benny. I'll take Morelli." "No," Veronica replied, resolute. "We go together. I'm not letting my father out of my sight." Jack hesitated, but then nodded. "All right, but stay alert. Morelli still has men out there." They left the warehouse, Morelli handcuffed between Jack and Veronica. Benny helped Charles, who was visibly weakened, but determined to see the end of this battle. They walked through the still deserted streets, the cold morning air sending a shiver down their spines. They reached the car, and Jack shoved Morelli into the back seat, locking the door. "Let's go quickly," he said, getting in and starting the engine. The drive to the police station seemed endless. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see Morelli's henchmen at any moment. But the city seemed surprisingly calm. When they arrived at the police station, Jack and Veronica helped Morelli inside. The place was bustling, officers running back and forth, and the sound of ringing phones was incessant. The lead detective, a robust man with a stern appearance, approached them. "Malone, what have you got here?" the detective asked, looking at Morelli with disdain. "Enough evidence to bring down Morelli and his operation," Jack replied, handing over the folder of documents. "And witnesses ready to testify." The detective quickly flipped through the papers, his eyes widening with each page. This is huge. We'll need protection for all of you. Morelli won't take this lying down." Jack nodded. "We know. But we're ready." Suddenly the station doors burst open and a hail of bullets flew through the air. Morelli's henchmen had arrived, determined to rescue their boss. Jack pushed Veronica behind a desk, drawing his gun and returning fire. "Protect Charles and Veronica!" Jack shouted to the officers, who quickly formed a defensive circle around them. The firefight was intense, the sound of bullets echoing off the station walls. Jack advanced, firing with precision, taking down one henchman after another. Benny, beside Charles, tried to stay calm, but the tension was visible on his face. Finally, with the help of the police, they managed to subdue the attackers. The station was in chaos, but Morelli was still in custody. Jack approached Veronica, helping her up. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes filled with concern. "I am," she replied, breathless but determined. "Let's finish this once and for all." The lead detective approached, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Malone, that was impressive, but we need to get everyone out of here. We'll take you to a safe location until things calm down." Jack nodded. "Let's do it. Morelli can't escape justice." As they were escorted out of the station, Jack glanced at Morelli, who was being led away by the officers. "It's over, Morelli. You're going to pay for everything." Morelli just laughed, a hollow and hopeless sound. "This is far from over, Malone. You'll never take me down completely." Jack clenched his teeth, feeling the anger rise within him. "We'll see." They left the station, the sun beginning to light up the city. Jack knew the battle wasn't completely won, but this was a crucial step. Alongside Veronica, Charles, and Benny, he felt that finally justice was within reach. The city, with all its dark secrets, was beginning to wake up, and Jack Malone was determined to ensure the truth prevailed. As they headed to the safe house, Jack's mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. The evidence they had gathered was enough to bring down Morelli's empire, but he knew there would be more challenges ahead. Morelli's influence ran deep, and his network of corruption and violence wouldn't be easily dismantled. At the safe house, a secure location provided by the police, they settled in and began to regroup. The lead detective, now more relaxed but still vigilant, joined them to discuss the next steps. "Malone, we need to move fast with this," the detective said. "We've already started processing the evidence, and we'll be making arrests based on the information you provided. But we need to keep you all safe." Jack nodded. "We're ready to testify, and we have more information if you need it." Veronica stepped forward, her resolve stronger than ever. "We won't stop until Morelli and his entire operation are brought to justice." Charles, though still weak, added, "We have to ensure this never happens again. The people he's hurt, the lives he's destroyed, they deserve justice." Benny, usually the most anxious among them, showed a newfound determination. "We're all in this together. Let's finish what we started." As the sun rose higher, casting its light over the city, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come a long way, and the road ahead was still fraught with danger. But with the evidence they had, and the determination of their group, they were closer than ever to bringing down Morelli's reign of terror. Together, they would face whatever came next, ready to fight for justice and the future of their city. And Jack knew that, with their combined strength and resolve, they had a real chance at making a difference. Chapter 9. The Truth Comes to Light. The temporary safe house offered a sense of security, but Jack knew it was only a momentary calm. The police protection team was everywhere, ensuring that no one entered or left without authorization. The small room where they gathered was illuminated by a solitary lamp, casting elongated shadows on the walls. Charles sat in a chair, slowly regaining his strength. Veronica was beside him, offering comfort. Benny, always vigilant, watched out the window, scanning for any signs of danger. Jack stood, analyzing the remaining documents. "We need to ensure these proofs reach the press without interference," Jack said, breaking the silence. "Morelli still has men out there, and they won't stop until this is buried." Veronica looked at Jack, determination shining in her eyes. "O'Leary is already working on the article. He promised that the special edition will be out tomorrow morning, with everything exposed. We just need to survive until then." Jack nodded. "We need a plan to ensure Morelli has no chance to retaliate. We need to dismantle his resources and contacts." Charles lifted his head, visibly stronger. "Jack, there's one last hideout of Morelli's we haven't mentioned, a warehouse on the east side of the city. It's where he keeps all the financial records. If we can get that, we'll finish him for good." "That's dangerous," Benny said, turning from the window. "But I think it's our best chance. If we cut off his resources, Morelli will have no power left." "Let's do it," Jack decided. "Veronica, you and Charles stay here. Benny and I will go to the warehouse. Once we have the records, we'll come back here and ensure the press gets everything." They left the safe house as night fell over the city. Jack and Benny moved through the dark streets, their steps quick and silent. The East Side warehouse was located in an industrial area, an ideal spot to hide illegal activities. They arrived at the warehouse and scoped out the location. There were guards, but not as many as expected. "Morelli must have pulled some men to reinforce other areas," Jack whispered. "Let's take advantage of that." They slipped through the shadows, skillfully avoiding the guards. They entered the warehouse through a side door, finding a room full of files and documents. Benny began rummaging through the drawers, while Jack kept watch. "Got it," Benny said, holding up a thick folder. "All the financial records. This will bury Morelli for good." Jack nodded, satisfied. "Let's get out of here before anyone finds us." As they headed for the exit, they heard footsteps. Jack signaled for Benny to hide, drawing his revolver. The footsteps grew closer, and the door was opened by one of Morelli's henchmen. Before he could react, Jack took him down with a quick strike. "Let's go, quickly," Jack said, and they left the warehouse, heading back to the car. They drove back to the safe house, their hearts still pounding from the adrenaline. When they arrived, Veronica and Charles greeted them anxiously. "We got it," Jack said, handing the folder to Charles. "This is the end of Morelli." The next morning arrived with a sense of renewal. The news spread quickly, O'Leary's article detailing every crime, every bribe, and Morelli's human trafficking scheme. The city was in shock, and the police began arresting everyone involved. Don Vito Morelli, stripped of resources and allies, was brought to trial. Jack, Veronica, Charles, and Benny testified, revealing everything they knew. Justice was finally being served. After the trial, Jack and Veronica walked through the city, observing the changes beginning to take place. "You made this happen, Jack," Veronica said, gratitude evident in her voice. "Thank you for everything." Jack smiled slightly, the weight of the event still present, but with a sense of relief. "It was a team effort, and we still have a lot to do. But at least now, the city has a chance." As the sun set, bathing the city in a golden light, Jack knew his work would never truly end. But for now, there was peace in knowing that for a moment, justice had prevailed. Chapter 10. Epilogue: The New Dawn. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, onlookers, and court officials filled the galleries. Don Vito Morelli sat in the defendant's chair, handcuffed, his expression hardened. The judge, an austere-looking man, reviewed the documents meticulously. Jack, Veronica, Charles, and Benny sat together, awaiting the verdict. The silence was palpable when the judge finally lifted his eyes and looked at Morelli. "Don Vito Morelli, this court finds you guilty of all charges brought against you: bribery, extortion, and human trafficking. The sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The room erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Jack felt an enormous weight lifted from his shoulders. He looked at Veronica, who had tears in her eyes but a smile of relief on her face. Charles and Benny embraced, celebrating the victory. After the verdict, they exited the courthouse, the sunlight shining brightly, as if the city itself were celebrating the fall of Morelli's empire. Outside, reporters swarmed Jack and the others, cameras and microphones thrust in their direction. "Mr. Malone, how do you feel now that Don Vito Morelli has been convicted?" asked one reporter, pushing a microphone into his face. Jack gave a tired but satisfied smile. "I feel that justice has finally prevailed. It was a team effort, and we couldn't have done it without the support of everyone who believed in the truth." Veronica approached Jack, linking her arm with his. "My father committed horrible crimes, but today we showed that no one is above the law. This city can finally start to heal." After the brief interview, they moved away from the crowd and walked through the streets. The city felt different now, less grim, as if a new energy was beginning to emerge. Jack knew that despite the victory, there was still much work to be done. But for now, he allowed himself to feel a rare moment of peace. "Jack," said Veronica, breaking the silence, "what are you going to do now?" He looked at her, pondering for a moment. "I think I'll take some time for myself, maybe travel a bit, find a quiet place. But I know I won't be able to stay away from this city for long." Veronica smiled. "You'll always be needed here. The city needs people like you." Jack nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "And you? What will you do?" "I'm going to try to rebuild my life," Veronica replied. "Maybe help other victims of the Mafia. I want to do something that really makes a difference." Jack smiled, admiring her determination. "You're going to do a great job, Veronica. I'm sure of it." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, Jack, Veronica, Charles, and Benny continued to walk. They knew that together they had changed the fate of this city, and although challenges remained, hope had been restored. That night, Jack returned to his office. The place seemed more peaceful now, as if the ghosts of the past had finally found rest. He sat behind his desk, lit a cigarette, and looked out the window, observing the city lights. A new beginning was in sight, and Jack knew that no matter what the future held, he was ready. Because in the end, the truth always prevails, and as long as there was injustice in the world, he would be there, fighting in the shadows, ensuring that justice shone brightly.